Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Asia Clean Energy Forum session on economy-wide energy evolution. I hope that's the session you were intending to join. If it wasn't, please stay with us anyway. It's going to be a great session. My name is Camilla Fenning. I'm the director of the UK government's Southeast Asia Climate and Energy Network. And I also lead the UK government's development programme in ASEAN on low carbon energy, particularly focusing on green finance and energy efficiency. So this session, we've got three great presentations, two great panelists. We're talking about how we need to have an economy-wide energy evolution. And I think that's particularly important in Asia, and particularly important given the need for sort of innovation in this area, which I'm sure Asia is going to come up with so many fantastic innovations on this particular theme. We've done a lot of progress on using renewable energy for electricity, but maybe a little bit more slow in terms of other emissions reductions, such as on transport and heavy industry. So we're going to have a look at that, and also as part of the session, also looking at driving reductions in embedded energy through circular economy approaches. So that's just the sort of basic context of this session. And we're going to turn now to our scene setter, who is Atsu Sakai, Senior Energy Specialist of East Asia Department of the ADB. He implements a $260 million low carbon district heating project in Qingdao, and has recently processed one of the world's largest battery energy storage systems in Mongolia. So over to you, Atsu, for the scene setter. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. It is my honor to provide the scene-setting talk here. And my name is Atsu, a Senior Energy Specialist of Asian Development Bank. This year's Asian Clean Energy Forum aims to focus more on the development frontline. It's been over 10 years since the approval of the ADB's Energy Policy 2009. The development circumstances have changed quickly last 10 years. For example, the more private sector has joined the renewable energy development. We have also observed that more emerging technologies like the batteries and also the operational practices like auction pricing have in place. Among all, as the development member countries' economic grow, their development challenges have got more complicated, and some look beyond what a single sector development can tackle with. In order to adapt the development approach to the changing circumstances, the international financiers like ADB need to reset our mindset and develop corresponding development approaches. ADB's energy sector investments need to shift from an emphasis on traditional energy supply to focus more on value-added activities that meet its Strategy 2030 operational priorities. These could include food security, sustainable cities, poverty reduction, and gender empowerment. So how can we more effectively address the changing development challenges? Well, one of our answers is today's agenda, multi-sector approaches to clean energy development, or what we call Energy Plus Plus approach. Among the three sessions under track 2, today's session will explore how energy sector development and the country's economic growth would interact each other. We have three distinguished presenters who will share their lessons learned from past or ongoing projects. Very interesting presentations ranging from low carbon emission city development to building design and community economy development with geothermal based energy supply. After the session, I hope we have some clear direction of future development approach of clean energy. I'm excited to listen to the presentation. So now back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atsu. for setting us up nicely for that. So we are now going to go to our first presenter, who is Santi Banjanador. Santi works on project and cost control for GDE, that's Geo Deeper Energy. She's an engineering consultant by training and describes herself as a geothermal energy enthusiast, which I think is a fantastic sobriquet. So Santi, over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gamelia. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Santi, and I'm from Geothermal Energy. I will talk to you later about my company. So, today I will present about the geothermal direct use in Dieng, Indonesia. The authors of this presentation is Agung Wisnu and Sukradinata from Geothermal Energy, also Filori and Shannon from ADB. So this is the content of my presentation. First, introduction, rationally brief of Dieng data, study on direct use in Dieng, and the last one is strategic values. Let's start with the introduction. So Indonesia is an archipelago country in Southeast Asia, and Geothermal Energy, as one of the state-owned company, is a geothermal developer. Our head office is located in Jakarta, and we already operate 2 fields, Patuha in West Java and Dieng in Central Java. As you can see in the picture, in the left side is Dieng, which is surrounded by the agricultural field, and the right side is Patuha, surrounded by the tea plantation. It's very beautiful there. So our project, Dieng 2 and Patuha 2, is initiated in 2019, and we got the loan from ADB. So the source of fund is from Equity, ADB, and Clean Technology Fund. Each unit of the Dieng 2 and Patuha 2 will have net capacity 55 megawatts, and Dieng Unit 1 and Patuha Unit 1 is already operated by 2002 and 2014. Rationale of this presentation, the first one is that we are, as we are aware that some of you is renewable the direct use. So direct use is that the utilization of geothermal without converting the heat. So we can use the heat to added value some of the commodity. Actually, it's already implemented in worldwide with many viable application and sustainable operation and maintenance, such as Blue Lagoon in Iceland. But in Indonesia itself, we got so many challenges so that there are several stagnant projects for direct use. As we can see in the recent study by LAN, which is presented in WGC 2020, it said that Indonesia has no new record in geothermal direct use reported in WGC 2015. In Indonesia itself, we have several direct use implementations such as palm sugar in Sarang. Looking for this opportunity and challenge, Geothermal Energy conducted pre-feasibility study in 2018 and finished in 2019. It indicates that some of direct use implementation may be conducted in Dieng due to the resource and the market. And also Dieng area is very close to the community, so we have to have the correlation with the community there. So this is the brief data of Dieng area. This information is becoming important because direct use study will have suitable connection and matching with the characteristic of the area. First of all, we know that Dieng is mountainous area located in elevation more than 1,500 meters above sea level, and it's with average temperature 14 to 23 degrees Celsius. In last year, we got the lowest temperature, -9 degrees Celsius, so it's cold there. Then we have the opportunity to implement direct use for heater, maybe for air or maybe for water heater. Majority people live in Dieng. Livelihood is farmer, also home industries for agriculture or small medium enterprises related to tourism. With potential agriculture commodity consists of potato, carica, carrot, and herbal roots. And also Dieng is very known as a tourism attractive area such as Telaga Warna, Sikidang Crater, Arjuna Temple. This is the Hindu temple, and Sikunir Hill. And also, Dieng has annual event called Dieng Culture Festival with more than 150,000 visitors in 2019. This project will be implemented in 10 villages and 2 districts related to development of the inspection unit. So I will start little bit technical here about the resource or the geothermal fluids that may be used in Dieng. As we may know, there is several sources of fluids that we can use for direct use. So it can maybe from manifestation, from waste heat, or from drilling the well. The most attractive one is brine from outlet separator because the temperature is relatively high and the pressure is relatively high, while we normally injected the fluids into subsurface through the injection well. I've shown the temperature here because in direct use application, this is the most important parameter to be considered, the temperature of the geothermal fluids. About the drilling well itself, due to the high cost and risk of the geothermal well, we don't consider here in the study. So next, we also do the market assessment. As you can see the picture that I've got from the Google Maps, you will see the blue line is the line when we go through to our office in Dieng. We can see there are several homestay there. We do random sampling from more than 30 homestay, and we found they have 5 to 10 rooms with approximately more than 30% of the homestay has more than 10 rooms. Currently, they use LPG as their heater, and we got estimated expenses from them. We potentially implement direct use here because the market is there. Other market assessment we've done is to agricultural processing. As I mentioned before, there is 2 districts that affected in this project, Wonosobo and Banjarnegara. And Wonosobo itself produces carica more than 300 tons per year. It's quite a big number. And our finding is at least 8 small medium enterprises process the carica and potato there. Currently, they use LPG also and process up to 600 kilogram per month. And their final product will be packaging like the picture you've seen in the slides with 0.5 to 5 ton per month. It's quite a big number. And they use heat to process the carica. So the market also there. As a conclusion, the proposed program in Dieng, we found that at least 3 applications which is technically acceptable and financially viable. For homestay, for space and water heating, we've got the estimated capex and all the financial related parameters there. And also for pools or swimming pools, because so many tourism will go to Dieng. And the last one is carica processing or agro industry. We also got the financial parameters there. Other area that may be considered also greenhouse and coffee drying. If we jump to the challenge, we know that we have several challenges to implement direct use in Dieng because the cooperation scheme with local government or enterprises is still fluid. And then we got to confirm to our government, especially Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, about the license of direct use. Because right now, we don't have any regulation about this. And then 4.3, it is communication to the community, because we need the fully acceptance from the community. The last one is the sustainable operation and maintenance for direct use, which is not interfere the power plant as our core business. So this is the boxes that explain about the timeline, about our schedule. But it's still the blue boxes. You see what we've been through. We already do the pre-feasibility study in 2018-2019, and we assisted by the consultant. We got the result, recommended application, financial analysis, and proposed business scheme. We also already conducted the FS or feasibility study term of reference in 2022 by PMU, our team, and we implemented in the PMC bid document. PMC is the consultant that will help us to do all the project. And then in the green boxes, you will find our plan. Our plan still need intense coordination with GeoDipa member, with business development or related shareholders. We will update the feasibility study. We will do the detailed design and construction by the PMC and by the constructor. Last but not least, this is the strategic value for implement the direct use. We think that we still have to consider several strategic values for GeoDipa itself and our shareholders. First of all, it will increase our company capacity and capability with potential income increases. And for the society, it may affect to economic of surrounding society and increase the job opportunity, which may also affect the prosperity of people and purchasing power. And the second one is enhance the sense of belonging of geothermal to society nearby our power plant. And the third aspect is environmental. By using the direct use, we hope that we will decrease the fossil fuel utilization and we will increase the national determined contribution in greenhouse gas emission as a Paris Agreement. And the last one, for government side, we hope that we can synergize with local government and optimize the utilization of geothermal, especially direct use. And also, by increasing the tourism, there is multiplier effect to increase the tax. That's all for my presentation. Thank you very much, and back to the moderator.
Santi, thank you very much. That was a really interesting presentation. I was fascinated by the amount of applications there are for geothermal energy in your presentation, and also really noted the point about the need for government and community buy-in. And please do, any of the participants, do start thinking about questions that you want to give to the presenters or the panelists, which we will have after these sessions. So thank you very much for that. We will now go on to our second presentation, who is Brent Habig. Brent is in America and it's the early hours, so he has pre-recorded his presentation. He leads the Institute for Sustainable Communities portfolio programs that accelerate climate change and has got a wealth of experience in that field. So over to Brent for his recorded presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Brent Habig with the Institute for Sustainable Communities. I'm happy to share our experiences with driving an economy-wide energy transformation through our work with cities and industry in Asia. This presentation will include a case study from our work with cities in China, as well as a case study of a new business model focused on industry in India. Overall, I'm thrilled with the topic of this panel because our work does support an economy-wide energy transition We believe this is essential for climate change mitigation. The IPCC states that limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade requires transformation of 4 key systems: energy, land use and ecosystems, urban and infrastructure, and industry. I will focus on the last 2, urban and industry. As you can see in the pie chart, the power sector alone only accounts for 29% of all of the power generated by the economy. So 71% is sitting outside of the power sector, and it's obviously critical to engage and support improvements in that a large fraction of the energy generation. The additional point is that electrification and energy efficiency, they happen at the end use level. So that's another key reason to work across the economy rather than only focus on the power sector. Drilling down on cities and industry, on the left, cities represent 64% of energy consumption. So this is a key building block in the whole economy energy transformation. With cities, you have the opportunity to tackle many sectors at once. This also includes people-centric solutions that can advance other issues, for example, equity, and it can be justified against a wide range of co-benefits, including health, climate change, and I'll share a case study from our work with the city of Shantan to demonstrate essentially the energy transformation at a city level. On the right, at the industry side, industry is another key building block in terms of the energy portfolio, representing 57% of power consumption. That's the largest sector for non-OECD countries. 85% of industrial energy is generated outside of the grid. So there's a large amount of self-generation of energy within industry. This results in a wide range of opportunities for improvement, including optimizing thermal generation, electrification, energy efficiency. And so again, I'll share a case study of this involving a new business model that we've launched in India. So shifting over to China, the city of Xiangtan is in Hunan province in central China. It's an industrial city with a population of about 2.7 million. Our entry point for this work was early peaking planning. So how could we support the city to peak emissions prior to China's Paris Accord commitment or their NDC of a date of so we were working to support Shantan to peak in advance of 2030. This is a whole of economy scope involving the power sector, industry, transport, and building. And you can see essentially a snapshot of the baseline through the pie charts below. Grid-based electricity is a small component of overall power generation at just under 17%. So quite a bit of work to do outside of the power sector. And then as far as consumption and end use sectors is concerned, manufacturing is by far the largest, and that's reflective of an industrial city. Essentially, the majority of the energy is consumed through the industry footprint of the city as opposed to through the consumption of the population. So our work involved development of key scenarios in developing the early peaking plan, and you can see in the dark blue the business as usual scenario that would peak well after 2035. We had an aggressive decarbonization ideal scenario in yellow that would peak in 20, but that involved too many negative economic consequences, so we focused on the 2 middle scenarios. The light blue is focused on energy optimization, and the red is the scenario that we ended up selecting and that has been ratified via policy. That is essentially their official early peaking scenario that involves peaking by 2027. As far as the contributions to this by sector, the energy sector was a key contributor. You'll see in the pie chart low carbon energy contributing 22% of the benefits. But by far the largest contributors were energy efficiency at 44% and the industrial transformation at just under 32%. This plan, as it's implemented, will have quite significant greenhouse gas reductions, 4.2 million metric tons, the equivalent of taking about 900,000 cars off the road. Now this work, because of this is an industrial city, it required very close collaboration with Shantan Steel. Shantan Steel is the largest energy consumer in the city and responsible for 60% of the city's emissions. So there would be no early peaking or no energy transformation without engagement with Shantan Steel. The collaboration with the business allowed data sharing, and through that data sharing we were able to benchmark and identify opportunities to jointly develop KPIs that would then allow accountability and coordination between government and industry. The focal point of this work was energy efficiency. Hopefully this gives a taste that economy-wide interventions can engage both cities and industry together. Now shifting to India and to energy efficiency, and the context here is motors. Industrial motors account for 1/3 of India's power consumption, so that's an enormous fraction of India's energy portfolio. 85% of these motors can benefit from an upgrade to the IE3 standard. Quite a bit of the motor use is happening at the SME level that represents 25% of India's industrial energy use. Yet energy efficiency investments within SMEs face a large number of barriers, including insufficient knowledge, costs, financing challenges, as well as inadequate policy incentives. So in response to this backdrop, I partnered with EES Energy Efficiency Services Limited, which is an Indian super ESCO, sort of a government-sponsored ESCO, and we developed a stakeholder business model involving factories as well as motor vendors and financial institutions. So essentially through this model, ESL would arrange advanced orders from factories, and then they would negotiate with motor vendors to aggregate demand and offer bulk purchases. This created a number of benefits, including a 70% reduction in the price of the motors, which dramatically shifts the payback requirements. They were also able to secure a 3-year warranty, negotiation, and through the aggregation. The business model includes embedded finance, so there's no requirement for upfront payment. And the SME participants were able to repay via the energy savings themselves. So you can see this is a turnkey business model that would allow small businesses to replace their motors in a way that would offer higher value, and because it's pre-bundled with finance, would result in a much easier decision to ultimately adopt the energy efficient motors. So we're in the process of scaling this in India and at the same time expanding the model throughout Asia. India, our target is 50,000 motors to be replaced. This will result in an annual GHG reduction of 342,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. We've completed demonstration pilots and essentially installed and monitored 30 motors in 3 clusters throughout India. This is documented energy savings of 7 to 15%, a payback period of 6 to 12 months, 5 million kilowatt hours of lifetime energy savings from this pilot alone, and about 500,000 US dollars of savings. We're about 10% of the way through. We've got about 5,000 motors that have been replaced through 36 factories. So we're making good progress against that goal. And in parallel, we're expanding this model elsewhere in Asia, and we have key discussions underway with key partners. And if you're interested in participating or learning more, certainly do reach out to me. We're working with ESCOs in India as well as Vietnam. You can see a set of motor manufacturers, financial ADB, and governments of India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. So hopefully this is a good example of how a new business model can enable energy efficiency adoption at scale. So, working towards conclusions, Asia's energy transformation requires a whole economy approach. Cities and industry are critical leverage points in this whole economy approach because they're responsible for the majority of energy consumption. Although supporting change in cities and industry is more complex than engaging a single sector like the power sector. It involves multi-stakeholder joint action. It also involves the necessity of developing new business models or confronting financing requirements, whether that's for industry or for cities. This energy transformation on the plus side can be accelerated by drawing in very compelling co-benefits, including climate mitigation, air quality benefits, as well as health benefits. So that's it. Thank you very much. Please do not hesitate to be in touch if you have any questions or would like further information. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to Brent for preparing that excellent presentation. And I think that his conclusions about the sort of complexity of change required for a whole economy approach is something that maybe we can talk about more in the question and answer session. And the fact that we need multi-stakeholder joint action and new business models and finance. Certainly coming from government, I'm always conscious that we need to work more with business, cities, civil society. So I think that's an important point that we can cover off during the discussion afterwards. So we're now going to move on to the third of our three presenters, and I'm delighted to introduce Richenda van Leeuwen, who's Managing Director for Emerging Clean Economies at the Rocky Mountain Institute. And she leads Rocky Mountain Institute's Emerging Markets Energy teams. She's also a board director of Celco and previously served as a founding US Women's Clean Energy Ambassador. I didn't know that there were those, but I'm delighted to hear that there were or are. So Richenda, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Camilla, and good afternoon, everybody. And yes, I live in the US despite the British accent. So I'm with the Rocky Mountain Institute. We're a 37-year-old nonprofit organization that focuses on a range of clean energy solutions, and particularly started out live focusing on the soft energy pathway. And many of you know our co-founder, Amory Lovins. Addressing energy use in urban areas is critical to limiting global warming, and particularly in that we are seeing that since buildings account for nearly 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions every year, and the population of urban areas could increase by as much as 2.5 billion people by 2050, especially in Asia and Africa, then there is going to be a massive need for additional buildings by 2050. So projected an area nearly equivalent to the current global building stock. So we need to be able to look at how we can fundamentally change the efficiency of buildings that are being built between now and 2050. And so we're really looking at net zero or close to net zero buildings and districts to help with both 2030 and 2050 energy and emissions targets. They're not enough by themselves, but they are certainly a part of the solution to this. Also looking at public health, pollution, development, and easing congestion as well. So which are all challenges as we look to build out this building stock. So RMI has been working on a number of innovative district scale zero energy projects in different parts of the world to help demonstrate some of the low carbon urban design with a different scale. We've been working both in the US, in China and India, and these are several of the projects that have been undertaken and provide some of the learnings I'm about to share with you as well. Our approach to net zero design is really to look at expanding the boundaries of the problem beyond the individual building, but really focusing on districts and taking an integrative approach to sustainability design and planning, focusing on net zero energy use, efficient renewable energy, looking at mobility, looking at water use as well, and really developing a sustainability roadmap. So we also look at integrating both proven and innovative technologies to achieve zero energy goals. Again, looking at certain things within the building itself, like improved envelope performance, passive design techniques, appliances, and then of course behavior as well. Looking at the clean energy generation, particularly looking at rooftop PV as one area to help with developing the efficiency and the energy goals for the project. Looking at a range of clean and efficient mobility solutions, and this is something that RMI is working on more broadly as well across different parts of Asia. Really looking at the overall transportation as well, and green commuting, and perhaps working from home and Zoom meetings as we're all doing now in this current context as well. And then also looking at a range of digital and smart technologies that have the ability to help with a lot of smart charging, automated charging, and advanced demand response as well. In India, RMI's modeled the impact of different design building technologies to help with the cooling demand of those residential buildings, looking at different areas such as passive design, the use of things like insulated concrete forms, and solar reflective paints, which all help to reduce the peak residential cooling load. And in the case of the use of solar chimneys, also help to reduce the fire risk as well for those buildings. Looking at an integrative approach to district clean energy, we are looking at the entire system to optimize for all needs, including the movement of heat through the district. On the left, you'll see the conventional systems, and then on the right, you'll see hybrid heat pump systems, which show that the boilers are only used on the coldest days, and cooling towers are only used on the hottest days as well. Digital and IT technology is also enabling and accelerating the clean energy transition, again, using different innovative approaches such as building controls, and really being able to look at the data on energy performance during the unoccupied state during the COVID lockdown for many commercial buildings to help really look at baselining performance, and then from there you can minimize the vampire loads. Looking at things like electric cranes, autonomous driverless trucks for moving goods, and then also looking at smart charging to optimize both the vehicle and the grid integration, but also really looking at helping to ease congestion as well, and certainly ease pollution through the use of EVs. An integrated energy service provider known as an IESP helps to align incentives and really drives greater investment opportunity by shifting upfront capital costs to a district energy developer, particularly for the heating and cooling equipment. It provides the basis for on-bill efficiency financing, again, which can help with the viability of the project, facilitating electricity market revenue opportunities as well, such as demand response, and then also centralizing the control of the site heating and cooling system. So it allows for the aggregation of site energy services while ensuring that the net zero energy project is financially attractive. It also helps to shift the upfront costs from individual buildings to a central entity, showing in fact that the first cost premium, and often these types of approaches tend to cost about 8 to 15% premium for efficient buildings. It helps to reduce that and actually potentially help to realize a higher profitability for the sale price for the net zero energy building as well. Some cross-cutting insights and lessons that RMI has learned. First of all, really the need for clear goals, the involvement of all stakeholders across all parts of the process and the project, really focusing on your goal rather than just trying to iterate on the basis of standard designs. Really also looking for those technical synergies, capturing heat and cooling and value from waste. We've already heard a little bit about geothermal, but really looking also at consideration for a CHP and for geothermal, and then building out that value proposition, as I've already mentioned, for service providers, and providing a financially attractive suite of services for developers and tenants. And then just to bring a US example into play as well, RMI has been involved with, as an advisor, and helping to retrofit the Empire State Building, a very iconic building in New York City. And from 2011, the work that we've been doing there has helped to improve the energy performance by more than 40% with a 3-year payback. So again, an attractive payback period that involved the use of a whole range of different technologies, including a regenerative braking in the elevators. As you can imagine, it's a very tall building, so a lot of elevator usage there as well, and potentially a next ongoing phase as well. So these are some of the case studies that we've been working on, continuing to build out to help with bringing the lessons learned into our ongoing building for the future, as well as we seek to really build out these highly efficient new building stocks with a view both to 2030 and to 2050. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Richenda, thank you very much for that presentation, and I think congratulations to the organisers as well for pairing your presentation with Santi's, so that we've just got a real span of the sort of work that's happening in both urban and rural communities, which I think has set us up nicely for our discussion. And I was interested in the presentation about the sort of behavioural change that you mentioned, and maybe we can talk about that a bit later. So we have got 1 or 2 questions sort of coming through on the Q&A app. I'll talk with those through in a minute. But first, I want to thank, first of all, our 3 presenters for 3 really, really interesting presentations. Thank you for all of that. And those are, of course, available for you to share and read at later stages as well. But I want now to bring in our 2 panelists who will give a little view of what they took away from those presentations, and then we can kind of get more dialogue going. So our panelists are Gavin Allwright, who's the Secretary General of the International Wind Association since its establishment in 2014. And Gavin also sits on an International Maritime Organization Advisory Committee, and is also
hybrid mixed bag of renewable energies efficiency measures, etc. Different fuels for different applications. And probably, one of the other big areas for me is this whole idea of the use of direct energy. We have a great tendency to focus on that secondary renewables, the alternative fuels, the electrification all the time. But there are huge benefits to using energy directly in things like solar water heating, obviously direct wind propulsion, which is something that we work with. And that idea of systems rather than silos. And unfortunately, shipping is very much in its own silo. That we need to be looking at things as logistic chains, looking at the inputs and outputs of all of these systems and how they interconnect with one another. So I was very, very interested to hear all of the presenters touching on many of those issues in those presentations.
Thanks, Gavin. Over to you, Alex, for your initial thoughts on the presentations and teasing out where we might bring the dialogue now.
Right. Thanks, Camilla. The three presentations were all revolving around, many of them had a huge overlap on energy efficiency. And, I tie it into IEA's estimate of $24.5 trillion of energy efficiency capital that will have to be mobilized between now and 2040. And 2/3 of that, or roughly $16.5 trillion, will have to flow through innovative business models, through equity vehicles, through PPPs, through ESCO performance contracts, through new mechanisms. And I like Nersanti's presentation because it's a new energy form that's been commoditized and being sold out. I was hoping to hear about cooling and refrigeration in a country like Indonesia. So if you had brine and 60-degree brine and converted to cooling, there would be a huge demand in a tropical market like Indonesia. But nonetheless, it's a new form of energy. So the next step there is, would the Indonesian government start to regulate other forms of distributed energy, such as brine? And then when Brent was talking about new energy efficiency models in India, and EESL, the Energy Efficiency Service Limited, being that aggregator that could flow not only equity but also know-how through public entities as well as private ESCOs. So the innovation there was finding aggregation, and that's where most developed and emerging markets are lacking. They lack an aggregation vehicle for energy efficiency investments. And then lastly, Richenda brings us a very, I like the fact that they were thinking about an integrated energy service provider, or IESP, because you've got to carve out some of the capital investments which a normal building developer or a normal district developer would actually want to avoid in upfront cost, right? So there's got to be some other recovery mechanism, and it's this IESP, which is like the long-term service provider, which provides a capital recovery mechanism for all the energy efficiency, clean energy, smart and digital technologies that are all coming into the district. So it's talking about innovation that brings capital, the $16.5 trillion, across multi-energy uses.
Thanks very much, Alex, and to Gavin. So, Alex, you mentioned geothermal brine, and we have a specific question actually from for Santi on that. So, Santi, we have somebody who wants to ask, how will GDE ensure that the potential users in the Dieng area will not be exposed to the risks of geothermal brine? And the same person also wants to know, how will GDE sell the energy to the potential direct use customers? So 2 specific questions for Santi.
Thank you very much, Camelia. I will try to answer about the risk of brine. Actually, we are aware about the risks, and we adapt to mitigate the risk. For technical point of view, we design the brine is in geodipa energy site. It means that there is a heat exchanger from two fluids, brine and fresh water. And then the brine side will be geodipa energy control. It means that it's well located in our plant and will be operated by our professional operator or staff. While the community will only interfere with the site of fresh water. So the community will have a little risk due to the brine. And then about the second question is about the energy selling to the customer. Since there is no regulation yet, so we propose that the cooperation with the community itself will divide it into two stages. It means the short term and long term. The short term, we will give it as community development or corporate social responsibility maybe. And then for the long term, we expect there is business to business scheme with based on our last study, the selling price is 0.36 to 0.51 US dollar cent per kilowatt thermal. That's all my answer, Camilla. I hope it's clear.
Thank you very much, Santi. Thank you. Yes, I think that's very clear. Good. Okay, so there's one other question that we've got so far on the list, which was that somebody would be interested to look at replacing motors with low energy devices in cement and the steel sector, and how should they go about it? It may be that we don't want to get into too much technical detail, but maybe Alex, you could try a high-level response on that question.
Sure, Camilla. You know, the steel and cement industries are very energy intensive, and interestingly, they have a very high motor population, if you must. So, you know, when in my last year of the IFC, we did a motor survey of cement and steel industries, and per plant they were a 4-digit population of motors. So the ancillary systems by themselves, you could replace them with high efficiency motors if they have variable loads. There are such things as variable speed frequency drives and all the intelligent controls. And then the more interesting part is after doing all the ancillaries like the motors, the blowers, the compressed air, then you move into the main processes themselves, the more energy intensive heat related processes. So it's the quick answer is you start with the ancillary like high efficiency motor retrofits, and then you move gradually towards the main heat related processes for both cement and steel.
Thanks very much, Alex. So Richenda, I just wanted to ask you whether you could say a little bit more about you know, what your research and lessons have shown you about the need for a more societal approach, as Gavin mentioned, I think, and you mentioned in your presentation needing to sort of look at behaviour change as part of the sort of suite of considerations in terms of doing these kind of very ambitious projects.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think there's behaviour change both in terms of the way that you approach the challenge and the way that we look at building out net zero energy buildings and districts as we are putting forward. So there's a challenge and a behavior change in terms of the way that you view the problem by expanding it and then really looking at it from a more integrated standpoint. And then I think I touched on a little bit in my presentation also behavior change in terms of looking at new approaches, for example, to green commuting and the behavior change that goes in that. I hesitate to say too much more about that because in fact we are seeing a massive global experiment in behavior change around commuting as a result of COVID-19, and we're all sort of engaging in radical new patterns of how we live and work. And really part of what we're talking about in this is actually intentionally building that into the design of the net zero energy district.
Thanks, Richenda. And actually mentioning COVID-19, I think we've done quite well not to mention it too much before now, but obviously the way that will affect schools, hospitals, government buildings, transport, as you say, how in some ways it gives an opportunity to sort of change the world in, you know, maybe a sort of low carbon way, but there might also be challenges around various aspects being less efficient, you know, in terms of not being able to have so many people in one space, for example, and the fact that will become more, you know, less efficient. I wonder if I could turn to Gavin and initially, and then perhaps Alex to come in as to, you know, what they think the opportunities and the challenges are in this position that we are in now that we weren't in 5-6 months ago.
Oh, that's a very quick question and a huge one. I think one thing that we're seeing in the UK at the moment is, unfortunately, a rebound in emissions. So as people are coming back into the workforce, they're avoiding public transport, for example. This is actually, we're seeing a rebound very dramatically in personal car use. I think that we've been given a breathing space. However, I do believe that a lot of governments have been very slow to see this as an opportunity, and I think the hashtag is Build Back Better, to actually look at a Green Deal that would be all-encompassing and put the resources behind there. There's been rhetoric around this, but I don't see a huge move towards this. I see a reshuffling or a relabeling of a lot of the government finance. That would tend to suggest that the signals going to the private sector are mixed. I do think that we have, especially in heavy transport, we have an opportunity here to really rethink the entire system, how this plugs in to the wider logistics chain. And again, I think people have realized or have changed their perception that we are looking at a highly integrated system, and it's become very obvious that it is not resilient at present. We talk about sustainability in the industrial sector, at least, or in the economic sector. It's often seen from an efficiency point of view. The other side of the sword here is the resilience side of things, and there I do see some movement, especially within the shipping industry and the ports industry, a focus on starting to rethink how this system works for the end users, how it integrates into a global logistics chain, and are we actually, for example, building ships that have a 20 to 30 year life span, a piece of floating infrastructure? Are we building those flexibly enough so they can be repurposed for the trade systems, for the different energy uses that we could be seeing coming down the line in the next 10 years? That has not been the case in the past. So I think perception has changed. However, I'm a little bit pessimistic on whether there's actually going to be finance and real systemic change coming from COVID-19. I think there is an opportunity here, but there's also a great problem about reverting back to business as usual, or even business as usual plus.
Thanks, Gavin. That's interesting to hear. Can I bring Alex in, and then I might have a comment or two myself. But Alex, first you.
Thanks, Camilla. I see the COVID opportunity to be huge as far as job generation of energy efficiency is concerned. Even on a pre-COVID, I was just looking at job generation in the US energy sector. In the last 2 to 3 years, 45 to 55% of new jobs in the energy sector were in energy efficiency. And the balance of like 45% was shared by renewables, oil and gas, and transmission and distribution. So it's interesting to see that across, there was a study in 2012 that did an average number of jobs across the US, UK, Canada, and many EU states. And they see that for every €1 million, 19.3 jobs were created So in the Philippines, we did a similar survey, and we're coming up with twice that figure, 37.5 jobs for every $1 million invested. So it's turning out to be 45% more labor intensive than the normal infrastructure project in a developing country context. So while many governments are designing stimulus programs, accelerating, let's say, tollways, public building construction, irrigation canals, and power, we're starting to see that energy efficiency would create more jobs per $1 million than the normal infrastructure. In fact, 45% more. And this is why we are still pushing, as wearing my nonprofit hat, we're still pushing this to be inserted in a couple of stimulus bills in the Congress in the Philippines. Now, post-COVID, what would be interesting is that the baseline of energy consumption would be drastically different, right? Camilla, you did mention that we're going to pack less people in trains, in airplanes, and cars, and buildings, and with the reduced intensity, with the reduced population density, we will be delivering less, or we will be powering the same with less people served, and that is going to increase the energy consumption baseline of many economies across subsectors. So we have to rethink what those baselines are, and that only increases the urgency to play catch up and bring back our energy consumption baselines to a pre-COVID levels. So these are the challenges ahead. We will not be consuming, the new normal will not be on a pre-COVID anymore as far as consumption baselines for energy efficiency.
Thank you, Alex. So it sounds like you're a little bit more optimistic than Gavin. I think I'm probably sort of somewhere in the middle. So just to mention, as I'm sure all of the participants listening to this know, the UK is hosting, in partnership with Italy, the COP26 big climate change talks, which have been postponed because of COVID until November 2021. But I think that this whole kind of green recovery narrative, build back better, grow back green, whichever phrase you want to use, could play in well to the COP26 preparation and this sense of needing greater ambition as we get towards that date. So maybe that's one positive, and certainly it's something that the British government is trying to connect the dots, if you like, in terms of sort of green recovery and the need for emissions reductions and our sort of nationally determined contributions, etc. I feel though, and I'd be really interested if anybody had comments on this, whether on the panel or on the Q&A. I haven't seen as much talk on green recovery or green deals in Asia as perhaps I have in Europe. And I don't know if that's because there's more focus now on the sort of humanitarian response, or it's to do with the sort of, I don't know, the economic circumstances, but I'd be interested to know if anybody had any thoughts on that. I'll throw that open to the panel. I don't know, Richenda, if you're still there, if you wanted to try that one, or anybody, please do come in.
I think I'll defer to those who are in Asia to speak first on that.
Well, technology for all is really about getting the investments recouped, right? So is it economic benefits and less commercial? And that's really the space of governments in certain concessional funds and development funds, where they should move towards pushing technology or mobilizing or deploying technologies to end-use sectors or the bottom of pyramid, or those sectors which are underserved, which the private sector would normally not get a commercial return on. Now, for those where you get viable returns because of fiscal incentives, because of technology cost reductions through time, then that's the space for commercial. And the development and government players should not crowd out commercial investors. But I should say that in green buildings and energy efficiency, unlike renewables, the velocity of capital investments from the private sector has been traditionally very slow. And that's why we need new business models like Santi's brine sale or direct use of other uses for brine, and the super ESCO I should have the aggregation model of the ESL in India, and the IESP model that Richanda has presented for net zero energy districts. So this is the way of the future. It's business models that would increase access to greener technologies through time.
Thank you, Alex. We were talking of technologies. I wonder whether I can ask how you see the advent of new technologies, particularly in Asia, and whether there is a problem about the higher the technology, the more exclusive it becomes, and whether how can we sort of have sort of equity, if you like, around the new technologies that I'm sure are around the corner, or will it be sort of one path for richer countries and a longer time lag for others, or will there be some potential to sort of leapfrog, for example, like mobile phones in Africa, so that that there isn't that sort of disparity in terms of equity on this transition to clean energy?
Right. Technologies, we should never take a snapshot. I think the biggest mistake of any developer, investor, or end user is to take a snapshot of the technology spectrum today. See it more like a moving train, right? So what's new today will be facing obsolescence 15 years down the road. So whether you're doing cook stoves for off-grid, whether you're doing LED today we talk about LED, but 10, 15 years from now, we may not be talking about LED for lighting. For cooling, the same, right? So it's new for certain sectors in end user classes today, but it's going to be mainstream from 5, 10, 15 years to the road, and it will be facing obsolescence. So I think the focus right now is, do we have the policy framework? Do we have the right delivery mechanisms? Do we have the right financial mechanisms and business models to deliver evolving technologies through time? And I think that's supposed to be the more durable way of improving access to such technologies, because it will always move. The train will keep on moving, and what's new today will have to be forced out into obsolescence 15, 20 years down the road. So the focus is not the technology. It's really about the delivery and investment mechanism in all markets.
And Camilla, if I may come in on this one now as well, just to say, and I completely agree with those comments. The challenge for us, of course, in a climate-constrained world, is getting those technologies to market soon enough, and really trying to see if you can compress the normal development timeline to get those technologies to market. And that's an area where we're looking at in Rocky Mountain Institute through a new combined accelerator and venture capital fund, expressly to try to bring those new technologies to market more rapidly, because we need those innovative approaches in order to be able to solve the climate crisis. So we've just launched a new initiative called Third Derivative, which is a combined accelerator together with a VC fund, which is really trying to help compress that normal development cycle. So in fact, we can source these technologies globally and really bring them to bear across as many markets as possible, as quickly as possible.
Thanks very much. And maybe we could bring this to a sort of practical example, and I could turn to Santi and just ask, Santi, in your presentation, you talked about needing good policy frameworks, and that was just mentioned by Alex as well. And Richenda was just talking about how to get tech to market. In terms of geothermal, what do you think is needed to make, to improve policy frameworks and to sort of get the technology that you need to market?
Yeah, Camelia, actually, Indonesia already have law number 21 year 2015 about the geothermal, but about it's a
I can't hear Santi. I can't hear her. Okay. Sorry, Santi. I think we've lost you. Sorry about that.
Hope Camilla, I could step in there and
sure,
maybe mention
Gavin,
a little bit around bringing low carbon shipping into play. I would absolutely agree with what Alex just said there regarding having a modular approach, if you like, being able to actually retrofit easily heavy pieces of infrastructure, such as shipping, but also those business models, leasing models, shifting heavy capex expenditure into operational expenditure, the opex. That's a key issue to bringing these new technologies online, but also creating a pathway for those future pipeline technologies coming through as well. One other thing I'd just like to say is within this facilitation environment, one thing that's often being lost is that full life cycle analysis of things like alternative fuels, alternative infrastructure systems. We really do need to be avoiding the shifting of externalities and upstream and downstream emissions. We really do need to be avoiding moving those into other sectors, thus being, for example, more competitive, however, actually increasing, say, for example, the carbon load. And we see this in shipping where, again, it's that siloed approach of saying, well, if we've got a new alternative fuel, don't worry about the fact that it uses 3 times as much renewable energy that it actually generates in that movable fuel, if you like. The health impacts of fossil fuels have always been externalized. We look at subsidies, but we need to look at those as indirect subsidies, environmental damage, health impacts. So I think the direct subsidies for fossil fuels worldwide is $500 billion US dollars. Indirect subsidies, you're looking at multiple trillions of dollars on top of that. And when we're bringing these technologies and systems into operation there, we're facing that subsidized system. So rather than bringing in subsidies for those renewable energy systems, we need to be looking at removing those subsidies from the traditional fossil fuel applications. So that, to me, I think that moving train concept is absolutely right, but we do need to look at those rails and are they taking us in the right direction as well.
Great, thank you, Gavin. And actually, I've got a question that's just come in for you, so I'll just read that out, and maybe you could just answer that. So sure. This is to Gavin. It said, when you said repurpose the public amenities such as public transport, which are currently underutilized, do you have in mind a framework to work on to repurpose an initiative on a broader perspective that can be driven across to the public sector? Or can you share more what you had in mind about a repurpose mechanism?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'm certainly not a specialist in these systems, but I can talk more authoritatively in the shipping sector, and in that we're looking at are we bringing in infrastructure that's fit for purpose? Can it be flexibly used? And when you're looking at, say, a fixed resource, say as a port, we very much need to be looking at the spatial use of that port facility. So we often are generating renewable energy off-site, bringing that into the port system, whereas you have huge areas of unused land, which is commercial, within the ports, but they're not allowed to be generating their own renewable energy, for example, due to national constraints, etc. So actually saying, okay, in that port facility, we need to be looking at it as a spatial development plan. When we're expanding these ports, integrating renewable energy zones within the ports, this is starting to happen in Europe, but I see other sectors where it's not. With the heavy transport aspect of shipping, we generally build ships, which are huge investments. We build ships to service a trade that's quite often already gone. So we're looking at trade over the last 5 years, and we're building a ship to actually facilitate that. Larger, getting economies of scale. However, that vessel is completely inflexible. If those trades shift to smaller ports, multinodal trade system, those very, very large ships can only operate between, say, 4 or 5 ports in the world. So we start to see stranded assets. And I know that the Rocky Mountain Institute has done work on this in the Carbon War Room, a lot around these stranded assets. That's something that we absolutely need to avoid. So we need to be building the more flexible systems that can handle changes in, for example, the energy usage, demographic changes, the use of different materials. 3D printing, for example, is a really good option for shipping. Are we going to be moving millions of tons of powder as opposed to millions of tons of consumer goods generated in China, for example? So that when I talk about repurposing, we need to go right back to how we design and what we design for. So I hope that's kind of put my comments in a little bit more perspective.
Thanks, that's very helpful, Gavin. I'm sure it has. Santi, did you want to come back in on your point? I'm sorry we lost you earlier.
Yeah, sure, Camelia. So actually, Geothermal Indonesia already have the law number 21 year 2014 as a replacement for the law number 27 year 2003. But for direct use itself, as a derivatives from the law, there is no regulation or policy yet. I think the regulation for direct use at least consists of business scheme, the permit, the price, and also the incentive for the producer or consumer, so that maybe it's more attractive for people to use direct use.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've just got about sort of 8 minutes left, and I want to leave a little bit of time to wrap up. But I wonder if we could just ask the panelists, what do you think is going to be the sort of the next big thing in terms of economy-wide energy transition? What is around the corner, or are we just going to have to get better at what we've already got? I mean, hydrogen economy seems to be something that's mentioned with increasing regularity, but that has its problems and is incredibly expensive. But what else is there that we should be looking out for, and particularly areas where Asia itself might be in the lead and being able to develop these particular technologies or ideas or solutions? Can I bring, I don't know if Richenda or Alex, maybe you want to come in here?
Yeah, well, it's all about whole of economy, right? If again, let's consider the subset of energy efficiency. How can we harvest all the wasted energy across sector? And one of these short-term approaches in many developing Asian countries is, how do we push not only private sector know-how, but private sector capital in public sector energy efficiency projects? So that would need new regulation, that would need new business models, that would need ESCO performance contracting procurement possible in many government agencies. We would need to enable PPPs, build, operate, transfer, and joint venture agreements with government. We will need, again, this to be very attractive as far as financiers and investors are also concerned. So it's flowing not only debt. I think we have to shift into more equity flows towards new clean energy asset classes such as energy efficiency. And the mistake in many countries was just to grow the debt finance side, but not the equity vehicles. So in growing, we would need economy-wide policy regulation. We will need more incentives to de-risk in upfront investments across the energy efficiency activities. We will need stimulus programs, and we will need private sector participation, even in public sector energy efficiency projects. So that's the road ahead for energy efficiency in developing Asia.
Thanks very much, Alex. Richenda, do you want to come in here, maybe just with a final comment?
Yes, I mean, and I think a very simply ditto on everything that was just said. But I do think also the increasing opportunities from that IT and the digital economy provide to us as well. We're going to be seeing a lot more opportunities, as I mentioned in my presentation, for increasing integration that is coming down the pipe that way. But I do want to finish as well. We did touch on equity, and of course, we're not only looking at new building for sort of higher cost residential communities. We really do need to be looking at approaches and business models that work for low-income communities as well. And a lot of my work in India with Selco is in fact looking at these new business models and approaches for very low-income communities. So I want to say that the technology and these approaches need to really work for poorer communities as well.
Great, thank you. Yes, a good point there. Thanks very much. I think just going back to something that was in Brent's presentation about cities and industry being critical leverage points, and I'm just wondering whether there's more that sort of governments need to do to sort of get our act together with cities and industry through the COP26 initiatives. We're trying to do a sort of road to net zero, which is certainly trying to engage the business community, but there's a huge amount that we need to do. I'm conscious that we've just got a couple of minutes left. So does anybody in the panel want to just sort of have, one sentence each on anything that they've taken away particularly from this session? Santi, anything from you?
Yeah, I think it's a very great session, and I'm aware that the development of technology will also bring values to the society, also to the environmental, and also to all the stakeholders related to the development itself. So I think thank you very much, everyone, for sharing today. Yeah,
Gavin, I know you've got to leave very promptly, so maybe you could just say a sentence or two, and then Alex.
Yeah, sure. I'd just like to make one comment: is that as we move forward, and I mentioned this before. That pathway forward is where are we actually moving to, and I think we shouldn't be afraid of participatory budget work, of involving society in not just the daily decision making or individual projects, but actually really having them participate in the vision and generating the pathway that we're moving forward, not just from elected officials or our structures that are in place today, but actually having those communities fully engaged. And I would absolutely agree with the previous speaker about having